Week 12, Teach and Share, Chapter 26, Corporate Law, taught to my mom on July 6, 2022. So do you know what a corporation is?
Yeah, it's a company, and when you are a corporation, it helps you have some protection under the law.
Yep. So corporation is a legal entity and recognized by state law and is an artificial being existing only in law. So the law will recognize a corporation as a person, which means it has the same rights that we do.
Yeah.
Access to courts, due process, speech rights, freedom from unreasonable searches, but they do not have the privilege against self-incrimination, which means in a lawsuit, courts can require corporations to disclose incriminating documents.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So following under corporations, there is some protection, what's called a corporate veil. So this protects corporations. So it's a legal concept that separates the corporation from the shareholders and protects them from being liable for what debts there are for the corporation. So it's kind of set up to, protect the corporation from the actual people that run it, the shareholders and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's not ironclad and can be, pierced by the court when fraud happens or the corporation doesn't follow statutory formalities. So in the case of fraud, officers or directors who facilitated it will be held liable for any resulting damages. So those are the people that run, that are running the company. When a corporation doesn't follow statutory formalities, that's another way that it's pierced. These can be, the statutory formalities can be corporation is set up to never make a profit or has insufficient capital at the time of business or the time of formation to meet any possible debts. Corporation fails to hold required meetings when personal and corporate interests or assets are commingled to the point that they are no longer separate. So it's protection up to a certain point, and if you do fraud or don't follow the guidelines, these statutory,
then the protection's gone.
yeah,
Seems fair to me.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm like, well, if you mess up, you mess up. So corporate personnel is shareholders. So these are individuals or entities that purchase shares of stock. They're the owners of the corporation and can change constantly without altering the existence of the corporation. And they have the ability to elect a board of directors who manage the corporation, and that board will hire the corporate officers who run the day-to-day operations. Does that make sense? So as well, when it comes to a corporation, there is tax involved. So when a profit is earned, the corporation can retain it or pass it on to the shareholders in the form of dividends.
Okay. That's when they divide it among everybody equally.
So profits can be subject to double taxation. So the company will pay taxes on the profits, but if the dividends are given to the shareholders, those shareholders will have to report that tax to the IRS and pay whatever the appropriate income tax would be for it.
All right, that seems fair to me.
It does. I think it's totally fair that if you are a shareholder of the company, you are required to pay taxes as well. Taxes and tithing. There you go. Exactly. So did you know that there are different types of corporations? So they can be classified in a number of ways, and I did not realize how many different types there were. So there is domestic, which has been formed and is operating in the home state. Foreign is one that is formed in one state but doing business in another. An alien corporation is formed in another country but does business in the United States. I didn't know about the alien one either. Private is created for private benefit. Public is one that is formed to meet some political or government purpose. Publicly held is a corporation whose shares are publicly traded in security markets like NASDAQ, NSE, stuff like that. Nonprofit are formed without a profit-making purpose, like the church, it's a nonprofit. Closed corporations are also referred to as C Corps, so C corporations. So shares are held by relatively few and operate as a partnership because typically the shareholders are family or they know each other. If a C corporation meets a number of requirements in subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code, it can operate as an S corp, and they have been elected to be taxed as a partnership. So if they receive that status, it can avoid taxes on the corporate level, but not the individual level. So the requirements to have an S corp status is domestic corporation, cannot be a member of an affiliated group of corporations. Shareholders must be individuals except in certain limited circumstances. Cannot have more than 100 shareholders. One class of stock is permitted, and shareholders can't be a non-resident alien, so they can't be outside of the country. So typically this would be more for like small business. Also, there is the professional corporations, which are typically operated by professionals and are designated by PC for professional corporation or PA for professional association. So this will be your doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants, stuff like that. Corporate organization, to be able to form corporation, there has to be a corporate charter received first, and it will contain the information of the business name, number of shares issued, corporate mailing address, registered agents information, name and address of one incorporator, and names and addresses of initial directors. So what can be confusing is the information about a registered agent and what its purpose is. So this is a person designated to receive notices for the corporation. So if they're sued, the summons and complaint will be delivered to the registered agent, but they're not an agent of the corporation. So that's different. A corporate agent is where they are. The agent have the authority on behalf of the corporation, while the registered agent doesn't. They're just getting like, they're the almost like a glorified secretary. They get notices and stuff like that. Oh, as well with the corporation organization are bylaws. So rules that dictate how a corporation will be governed or managed, can contain information about the officers and directors, methods of election and removal, list the duties owed to the corporation, and also have rules on how to operate. And if you fail to comply, that will constitute a breach of fiduciary duties of a director or officer. So things that they are supposed to be doing. Their trust that they will do this. Yeah, you do. You have to be careful with any business. So corporate powers are state statutes generally that grant corporations the power of perpetual existence, ability to be sued and be sued, own and convey property, enter into contracts, have all powers necessary to effect its legal purposes. So it just basically says this is what you have the ability to do. Any acts that go against the authority granted either by the statute or bylaws is beyond its authority, and the state can revoke the corporate charter, or the officer or director who performed that act may be held liable for damages to the corporation and shareholders. So if you mess up like bad and do something you're not supposed to, you'll be responsible to those that you report to, the shareholders and the corporation itself. So, you know, with this, it's always interesting to learn about laws when it comes to business. And, you know, thinking about my international business class, so we have this business set up. I was like, I wonder what type of corporation it would fall under if it was.
Talk about an LLC.
LLCs are different. Okay. Yeah, that's a limited liability corporation.
Yeah, that's what I could do for myself if I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in last week's information, in one of the chapters last week. But with my international business class, I was thinking, okay, so what type of corporation would we be? And I figured it would fall more underneath a public one because we'd have public shares and stuff like that. And I feel like understanding the nature of business laws will better help me understand my efforts in the business in the future. Like if I have a corporation, if it's, you know, whatever the case is. But do you feel like you learned a lot?
A lot.
I always feel like I learn more each week. I'm like, oh, well, this makes sense and that makes
And
sense.
when you're teaching, you always learn.
Yeah,
Like, that's what I feel.
and that's why I love this concept of teach and share. That we have the ability to teach somebody else what we learned.
It reinforces in your mind.
Yep,
Pretty cool program. I like it.
I like it. Well, thanks, Mama.